So I have recently finished the new Lego Batman game, and I also recently just caught up on Absolute Batman, and I have some thoughts on what I would like to see in a Batman story that focuses on wealth and both sides of the disparity in Gotham City. And I'm gonna talk more about Absolute Batman than the Lego Batman game. But the things I did notice and like and made me think that I found in Lego Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight, specifically in relation to this topic, is I quite like how the NPCs behave, and that when you're driving around and running around, they'll like duck and cover or like just roll their eyes or something, and it's pretty good world building because it shows that they're really used to living in Gotham and like the random stuff that will just happen to them on the street because it's Gotham City. So they just dodge roll out of the way of the car because they are ready for it, and I like that. And also, like, their dialogue, they'll just be like, oh, here we go again, like, whenever you, like, run straight into a fire hydrant or whatever, and I think that's pretty good characterization for, like, Gotham bystander, is that they would be, like, it's just not sustainable to be afraid all the time in Gotham City, because you just die, so a lot of them are more laid back about danger. I think that's interesting and good characterization for the average Gotham bystander, is that they're just a little bit less fazed by stuff than anybody else in the world would be. And we'll circle back to Gotham as a city in a minute. But on to Ultimate Batman. About how Batman is written and why I don't really love Absolute Batman, which is that they make him not a billionaire, and I think that like undercuts a lot of the more interesting theming that you could have with Batman, and specifically like how does a person with a really strong sense of justice and like Batman and Bruce Wayne's belief system act when they inherit literally $1 billion, because like Bruce Wayne didn't make billions of dollars, he inherited billions of dollars. So how does somebody with his moral values and, you know, $500 billion, how does that person act? How does that play out? I think that's actually something that's really interesting to explore, because I think the character of Batman and his wealth have like grown with society, right? He started as a millionaire, and as, you know, we started doing trickle-down economics and the wealth disparity got worse and inflation got worse, Bruce Wayne became a billionaire, right? He got richer as the wealth divide in real life widened. He became an even more hugely untouchable figure in terms of wealth, power, and status, except he didn't make that money, right? He inherited it. And I like that angle better for his character if we take like writing a Batman story that is like equally about Bruce Wayne as it is Batman, where you see like how a person who believes so much in a brighter future and the people of Gotham and has zero interest in making more money and has $500 billion, how does that person act? He is like just absurdly wealthy and absurdly privileged, and he has absolutely zero vested interest in preserving that system that he is a part of. So when he is moving like that, like what does that look like? Especially with like the other billionaires and the other wealthy Gotham elite and how they treat him. Because normally he's just very popular as Bruce Wayne and like that's it, end of story. But when you really think about it, if Bruce Wayne was moving on like an anti-billionaire agenda despite being a billionaire, that would stir up a lot of discomfort amongst the other billionaires and wealthy people in Gotham, because Bruce Wayne would be like paying his janitor $200,000 a year and personally showing up to his wedding and constructing libraries and museums and whatever, and just like do it, like spending money to spend money, paying people to pay people, doing absolutely nothing with a profit incentive at all. And how like threatening and uncomfortable that would be for other billionaires, because he's not falling in line and he's not preserving the system and he's going against the system, and how many enemies that would make him as Bruce Wayne, because his behavior where he does all the things that billionaires insist that they can't do, like pay their employees their worth and have OSHA compliant factories, and he's just showing no signs of stopping. How does that impact how he is viewed within that like social circle of the billionaires and the 1%? Like he would be a threat. He would not be their favorite person. He would make them very nervous that he was moving like that he was like doing things without any intention of making money, that this was someone who was completely unconcerned with building wealth he would be like a huge disruptor, and I feel like that's not explored enough. That like the way he would be acting would go against basically every single thing that has been done historically to make billionaires possible. And that's why I also think it's kind of dumb when people try and make the Wayne fortune like, oh my god, was the money unethical, by having Thomas Wayne be like involved in the mafia or something. Like, that's dumb as hell. Like, you don't need to have some kind of like criminal underground connection for your fortune to be unethical. If instead you found out that like, maybe not even Thomas Wayne, but like, it depends of how old money you want to make Bruce, because I feel like you could make that go either way. But if you want to go the route of like exploring how the fortune getting created was unethical, I think the much more interesting way of doing that is like, oh, he was stealing patents, and he was underpaying people, and he was outsourcing labor costs, and like things like that. Mundane exploitation is how you get to that point. Trampling everyday people is how you get to that point, not like a deal with the mob. You don't need to do that to make it of dubious morality. But even then, I don't think trying to look at the Wayne fortune as unethical in the past tense is that interesting either. I think looking at it as like, Bruce Wayne is actively trying to not be a billionaire. Like, he is giving this money away. He is interested in keeping only as much as it takes to like maintain his lifestyle and run the Batman project. He doesn't need the rest of it. So he's just building museums and like funding everything, because he's not interested in staying a billionaire. He's giving away money like with that mindset. And I think also there's room there with Gotham politics and how that plays out, and how a lot of it's very bribe heavy, how the GCPD is like super corrupt and all that, and that like Bruce Wayne could end up funding like half of the city's infrastructure himself because the government isn't doing it, and things like that, because that circles around to like the idea of Gotham as a place, in the sense of like, why do people stay in Gotham? There's a certain point where like, oh, they're stuck there because of like economic like factors, like they just don't have the money to move. At a certain point that doesn't work anymore, because when there's like a psycho murdering clown if there's a man with a freeze ray chasing you, at a certain point you're gonna just put your shit in a bag and walk if you have to. At a certain point you're just buying that bus ticket, and you'll figure it out once you get out of there, because it's life or death right? It's not about it, like, I think there has to be something else there as to why people stay in Gotham. And I think part of the reason people should stay in Gotham is what like the Wayne Industries ecosystem does for the people. It's like, why do people stay in Gotham? Well, maybe thanks to the Wayne Foundation, college is free in Gotham. Like, every college is completely free in Gotham City because of Bruce Wayne. Huge amount of the housing is rent controlled, and just things like that, where he's like very clearly trying to improve the material conditions by literally giving his money away. College is free because he single-handedly just pays everyone's tuition or whatever. They won't let him legally make college free, so he just manually pays the tuition of every single college student in Gotham. Like, things like that, where it's like he can't get around certain things, so he just bulldozes through with the money. Because it's not about maintaining the billions, it's about giving back to the city. It's about getting rid of the billions. I think that's a much more interesting angle, because like I said, that makes him a lot of enemies in the wealthy elite of Gotham. And then when you have that level of opposition as Bruce Wayne, we now have a stronger case for Batman. We now get to see what Bruce Wayne's limitations are, and the things that Bruce Wayne can't do, and why we need Batman and what Batman is for. Or at least like a stronger idea of that than we had before, because we can see what Bruce Wayne can't do and what Batman can. And I think it just rounds out his character more, because there's sometimes stories like, I forget what issue or run this was from, but there's like a human trafficking plot that was like taking kids from a Wayne orphanage. I think it's Damian at this point. I think Damian is Robin. He and Bruce look into it, whatever, and I think the kid who they were trying to find or help or whatever, I think he dies. And then they go back to the orphanage, and Bruce like punches the guy in charge of the orphanage, whatever. Stuff like that I don't think is inherently bad, but like if we want to do plots like that, I think we need to establish that Bruce Wayne funds, sponsors, maintains like 500 orphanages, which is why he didn't notice this was happening at one of them. Because if there's only one Wayne orphanage and he didn't notice the children literally going missing, that's like dumb as hell and really irresponsible on his part. To a degree that I don't think is like character conflict or character development, but like genuine neglect and lack of care for people, which is like, I think, contrary to the Batman ethos. So it's like, if we want to do stuff like that, where there's some guy like trying to do human trafficking at the orphanage run by Bruce Wayne, we need to establish that there's like hundreds of Wayne orphanages, that he single-handedly funds every orphanage in the city or something like that, so that it's not like something was going on in his house under his nose and he just doesn't pay attention. I think Bruce Wayne should be like actually good at being Bruce Wayne. And I think fleshing out why people stay in Gotham is also an interesting thing to do. Or like you get a little bit of this sometimes in certain Batman media, but they seem to have like a very lively, thriving art scene with the theater and the circus and the opera and whatever. So if you're like, oh, this has like a basically unmatched art scene in terms of opportunity, and college is free and all these other things, and it's like the crime and corruption is like the big problem, but there's so much there with the people and the culture, right? Like maybe Gotham is extremely walkable and has pretty extensive public transit, so you don't have to own a car, you don't have to pay car insurance, you don't have to have a driver's license, anything. If you live in Gotham City, you can get around, right? If we see Gotham more as a culturally vibrant city that's very well designed with beautiful architecture, that has a lot of government corruption and a rampant crime problem and a huge wealth divide alongside that, it makes more sense why some people are still there. And there's also the idea that like Gothamites who have lived there their whole lives have a very strong sense of identity and community as Gothamites. Like they live in a city that is like so unique in a lot of ways that they would probably have a very, very strong sense of identity around being from Gotham City, and that would probably lead to people staying there even when things aren't great. That's something that I feel like doesn't very often get addressed in Batman stories, is why is everybody else still here? We know why Batman's here. We know why Commissioner Gordon's here. Why are like the average person like not at a certain point packing their bags and taking a hike, right? And I wish Absolute Batman had gone into it a little bit more. It does, in fairness, right? With the whole Crime Alley friend group that they have. But I wish it was explored in more depth outside the context of heroes and villains. Like, more so just the average Joe Normal, right? So I do like how Absolute Batman does kind of go into that, but I wish it had done more with it. And also exploring how like the average Gotham citizen might be accustomed to a level of violence and might be like not that worried about a subway mugging compared to how a person would normally react. How many like regular Gotham citizens would be like strapped up, like packing heat like at the grocery store everywhere they went? In a world where supervillains exist, how is it that when they take hostages, none of the hostages like has a gun in their waistband because it's Gotham? I feel like that is also something that should happen more often, is that the citizens are like acclimated to this and therefore have their own ways of taking care of themselves regardless of superheroes. And I think Batman's relationship with basically all of his kids and other members of the Bat family are much more interesting when he is a billionaire, because like especially his relationship with Jason, especially once Jason is Red Hood, I think is very contextualized by their difference in background and like the wealth disparity between their childhoods, and how Jason went from being essentially kind of homeless to living with a billionaire, and what that would be like for him, like on a economic class consciousness level. Like with the exception of Tim and Damian and I guess kind of Cassandra, every other person in the Bat family is like working class. You know, Barbara's raised by a single parent, Dick is from the nomadic circus, Jason is from, you know, inner city projects, Stephanie has a supervillain dad, which is like, you know, its own host of problems, and her mom is like a doctor or something, so she's like or a nurse, I don't remember. But like everyone else in the Bat family does not come from even anywhere near the level of wealth and privilege that the Waynes come from, except for Tim and Damien. Not even really Cassandra, because she was she was essentially just in boot camp for her entire childhood. I mean, and I think that's part of what makes Damien interesting, and that might be its own separate video, actually, is my opinions on how Damien should be written, because I have a lot. But I think when it comes to Bruce's relationship with Damien, specifically the wealth aspect of that, and that Damien feels very differently about it than Bruce does, and that he at first seems to think that he has like divinely inherited his privilege as opposed to just sheer luck of the draw, and how that could be like a massive point of difference between the two of them. And that Bruce is like, you aren't special, you just got lucky having really rich, powerful parents, just like I did. And you need to use all of that to give back, because it's sheer luck, and you're not like any kind of like special little snowflake because your dad is rich, in which case would be more impactful for him saying it because he is the rich dad. If we take this angle, how that really puts him in like really sharp contrast to the Al Ghuls, and that Damien would see his grandfather and how his grandfather is so hell-bent on legacy and empire and living forever and preservation, and how Bruce Wayne seems to be desperately trying to get rid of his own fortune. And like that conflict and that approach to privilege and wealth being like kind of a central crux of Damien's character growth, is that he thinks he divinely inherited this privilege, and then he sees how differently Bruce handles it from how his grandfather does, and how different they are as people, and he starts to question, and he starts to look at things differently. Because I think that's something that doesn't get unpacked in Damien's stories enough. A lot of times it's just him learning to not be an asshole, which is all fine and dandy, but I think specifically Damien having to unpack his relationship with legacy and privilege, and that way that he got those things is arbitrary. There is nothing inherent about it to him. He just got lucky. Him having to come to the realization that legacy isn't about what you build, it's about what you give. It's about what you create for everyone else, not just yourself. So I think Damien having his stories more contextualized by the wealth and privilege aspect. It's just that a lot of writers with Batman really shy away from this whole storyline because it is complicated and like presently topical in the world. You end up with stuff like Absolute Batman where they're like, oh, what if Batman wasn't rich? And it's like, yeah, okay. All of his most interesting storylines, I think, come from reckoning with wealth and legacy sometimes as Bruce Wayne. I mean, you can do really interesting detective like Batman stories, but all of the interesting Bruce Wayne stories happen when you have that level of wealth and privilege to dissect and interrogate. Yeah, and you can have the other billionaires be mad that Bruce Wayne's always one-upping them and making them look bad. Actually acknowledging the wealth and privilege aspect is a lot for Tim and Damien's relationship too, because they both come from wealthy families, but Tim has a very similar mindset about that to Bruce, and that like it's luck, and I'm going to, use everything that I got from that to give back to the world. Whereas Damien is like, I'm the divine chosen heir, basically, at first, until he learns to not be like that. Them being the two members of the Bat family, like the only two members other than Bruce, who actually came from wealth from birth, and them specifically having kind of a rocky relationship with each other, and their differing opinions on that being part of it, instead of just like, oh, you replaced me. You don't understand the mission here. Like having these thoughts about each other's belief system and approach to crime fighting and wealth and whatever. I think Damien also having to interrogate the fact that he has very little concept of what it means to actually need money, because he has been like within a system of power that has taken care of him for his whole life, whether that was Talia and the League of Assassins or Bruce, Batman, whatever, is that he's never had to. He has this like kind of delusions of grandeur about his sense of self when he's actually never had to fend for himself before, ever. He's never had to really worry about where he was going to sleep or if he was going to get his next meal. Like that was always guaranteed, and he has very little concept of like money and like needing money or like caring about money, and how he needs to like get more in touch with that beyond an abstract level, right? Because he understands money and economics and all that on an intellectual, abstract, like textbook level, but he himself has never really had to deal with any of that. Like, do you think by the time Damien gets dropped with Bruce, he's ever had to actually pay for a meal in his life? Like, actually rifle through his pockets and get out like a $10 bill and pay for food? No. He's never had to go buy something before. He's so rich that he never had to, like, actually spend money. Actually, I think all of the Bat family's relationships to wealth would be very interesting to explore. Like, how Dick probably doesn't have a super... Like, he probably has a very different relationship to it than Jason would, because he was in a circus traveling nomadically, and then, you know, his parents died when he was like 9 or 10 or something, and then he went and lived with a billionaire. So he's had a very different life from someone who has been like trapped by their economic situation, and how that might affect his relationship with Jason, how he just might not understand certain things, and how Tim also might not understand certain things, because like we said, he was born into wealth. And that's also why it's interesting sometimes to put Jason and Stephanie together, because I like the idea of Stephanie having a similar economic background to Jason, being on the same wavelength about certain things in regards to that, and that like her family situation really did not stabilize until she and her mom got away from her dad and were able to be truly safe from him. But she spent a lot of her childhood with her dad still around, and with a lot of economic instability, because he's like a D-list supervillain. And how it was like really dangerous and really inconsistent income, and like sometimes none at all, and like how her life would have been, or her childhood would have been shaped by her economic situation and her like proximity to crime and all these other things, and how like she had her situation stabilized later in life after she became Batgirl, and she and her mom have gotten away from Cluemaster and everything. But like her childhood still would have been spent in a very similar way to Jason's. Because I think there's a much more nuanced way to go about this that isn't like, is having $1 billion bad actually? Because like, yeah, it is. But we know how Bruce got the money, which was just like luck. Basically. So I don't think we need to, I think we know having $1 billion is like not something that happens without people getting exploited. The question is now, how do we handle that? The question is, where do we go? How does this inform the relationship between the people in this family? What if Thomas Wayne gave money to the mafia once? You couldn't pay me to care. Yeah, I don't care. And one thing the Ultimate Batman was able to do that is not always done in Batman stories is a more interesting and in-depth exploration of wealth in Gotham City and the class divide, but it was only really able to do that in the context of taking Bruce out of the hot seat. I think a lot of the same plots and operations and everything that he's doing would be a lot more interesting if Bruce is still a billionaire, but just a class traitor, essentially. I think a lot of these stories are a lot more rich narratively if he's actively working to dismantle the system that he benefits more from than anybody else. Bruce Wayne having his billions and his wealth in a class traitor double agent way, where he can get other billionaires to admit malpractice to his face because they think he's one of them, only for the Batman to mysteriously go after them immediately afterward. I think that would be really cool. It also validates the need for Batman's existence, because these are the people that the police will basically never go after, no matter the evidence, and even if they do, they get off with really light sentences, if they're even charged. So if the law truly can't touch them, that's what Batman is for. I really like Absolute Batman's exploration of guilt and atonement through Thomas Wayne's death and Bruce's relationship to all of his friends, and I think it's a really interesting angle to have Bruce's friends and classmates all witness his dad's death and have their own feelings about the situation instead of Bruce being alone when it happens. I thought that was really interesting. That was one of my favorite parts of the story so far, is the way that Bruce has to talk to his friends about the thing that happened because everybody saw it and he can't really avoid that. I thought that was really interesting. I thought that was really compelling, especially the conversation he has with Wayland specifically about it, I believe. I thought was very well done. I dislike how the story still sometimes falls into the trap of evil billionaire who also experiments on orphans. and then we spend the whole story worried about the orphan experiments instead of addressing the billion-dollar elephant in the room. For once, it would be nice to have an evil billionaire antagonist whose evil is very banal and mundane and carelessly cruel, a story that dealt with the way that wealth hoarding and extortionate pricing of basic necessities ruins lives on a society-wide scale. They can still have a mustache to twirl and a private militia to fight, but their ultimate evil is the way they leech off society and everyone else's effort and work while violently enforcing the status quo instead of making lizard people in their lab that runs on hydraulic electricity via orphan blood. I get that the lizard people are more exciting, but there's a way for these stories to come together that focuses more on economic disparity being the root of a lot of problems. It's certainly the root of a lot of crime. If people felt like they had other options besides stealing or being in a gang, a lot of them would probably do it. And like I said, I appreciate how much more Ultimate Batman is willing to take that on than the average Batman story. But I wish something with this degree of directness would be done in a story where Bruce Wayne has all the wealth, resources, and privilege that he normally does. Even in Ultimate, he still has like a bunch of tech and a team in a cave helping him with like a 20 monitor computer. It's honestly not really that different of a setup. It's just the aesthetics that are kind of changed. I think sometimes we gloss over the fact too that like Stephanie is the real absolute Batman. When you think about it, in her original incarnation, like she was the one with zero resources, zero training, zero help, grew up in poverty, just had to like glue stick and scraps her way into a costume in the first place. Like this video is not about Stephanie Brown, but you want absolute Batman. It's just what she did, except with even less resources. But I think this conflict is so much more interesting and so much more poignant if Bruce has to deal with both sides of the issue and confront the way that his family specifically has benefited. I want to talk to you about Gotham Academy now for a bit. The original run, second semester, and first year, which is ongoing right now. Gotham Academy focuses on Olive Silverlock, who is a poor girl attending a private boarding school for rich kids thanks to Bruce Wayne's help after her mom crashes out crazy style and she has nowhere to go. She spends much of the story thinking about the way that she clashes with other kids and their wealthy upbringings and their perspectives versus her feelings of being out of place and from a very different world from all the other kids at the academy. And so there's a prequel series called First Year that's coming out right now. It's going to be a 6-issue miniseries and they're on issue 5. So there's one more coming at the end of this month, July, and then it's wrapped. And so far so good. So far it's been really great and I do recommend it. I also kind of recommend the original sort of for a more slice of life Gotham story, but I'm also really biased because I'm just very nostalgic for that series because I used to read it on the floor of my city library after school in middle school. A lot of the way I feel about it is probably very strongly influenced by that. I actually have a lot of really useless Gotham Academy opinions. It's really good sometimes, and other times it's really not. It kind of swings around a lot. I like the original 18 issues and the First Year prequel that's coming out right now, but second semester I did not enjoy nearly as much. Overall, I think it's a really interesting story when it focuses on Olive and her relationships to Kyle, her mom, Palmeline, Batman, the Arkham inmates, etc., and how different characters' economic status and upbringing influences them, and what version of Gotham they get to live in. But then it's going to switch to this like Scooby-Doo-esque plot starring Maps, who I think is far more enjoyable as a supporting character than as a protagonist. It's the opposite for Olive, who is an astronomically better character when you're in her head versus when you're not. The story ends up with these massive shifts in tone and subject matter as a result, and the narrative feels way less focused by the end than it did in the beginning. It's a rare case in comics where I think it would have been better if it took itself more seriously more often. Olive and Kyle's relationship is also really compelling with a pretty unique conflict for a romance in First Year and the beginning of the original run, but then it kind of sucks in the middle in second semester. They kind of lose what was interesting about it in the first place, and then it doesn't really go anywhere. Overall, First Year is the standout in terms of quality and tells a more focused story, likely because of its concise 6-issue runtime, and the art is really, really cool. I really, really like the art for this series, and it also retcons a fair bit of First Year. Actually, it changes a few things. I have a lot of opinions about Gotham Academy. It's really good sometimes, and it's really not others, but I digress rather severely, actually. Anywho, in First Year, and the original run, Olive really doesn't like Batman because he put her mom in Arkham, and she thinks her mom doesn't belong there. And the story focuses more on Arkham and how Gotham deals with the mentally ill people the same way as the supervillains some of the time, and Olive's mom, as far as Olive knows, is just an ordinary person with mental health issues and fire powers that respond poorly to that, but is locked up 2 cells down from Mr. Freeze. Olive's mom is in fact not so much Joe Normal, but she doesn't really know that at first. I really like to see stories like this that focus on how the not superheroes feel about Arkham or Gotham City. Olive is far from ordinary herself, possessing her mother's powers in a similar experience with mental illness, gaps in memory, hallucinations, drastic personality shifts. It's because her family is cursed and get possessed by the same evil spirit across generations. It's kind of a whole thing. I also don't really like that. I don't like that a ghost did it is the solution to what's going on there, but that, again, not what this video is about. Point is, Olive experiences all these mental health issues and all of these like huge gaps in memory and disorientation, very similar to what her mom experienced, and she doesn't hardly tell anyone, and when she does, she doesn't tell them everything, and she doesn't really reach out for as much help as she needs because she's afraid of being locked up in Arkham just like her mother. There's this scene in the second issue of First Year of Olive in her school uniform, like hugging her umbrella, walking down the halls of Arkham when she's there to visit her mom, and the contrast between what Olive is there for and what Arkham is feels so well illustrated in that scene. With the exception of Clayface, all the other inmates are rather polite to Olive as well. It's really interesting how a lot of the Rogues Gallery treat Olive because they view her as one of their own in a way. There's some neat world building stuff in the background of this series too, about a lot of Gotham's old money families like the Cobblepots and like the Diary of Millie Jane Cobblepot or whatever, and they read that book in class a couple times, I think. It keeps coming up. It addresses how like the majority of Gotham's most powerful, wealthiest old money families were extremely corrupt, not great people who got their fortunes in very unethical ways and used violence again to maintain that status quo. And there's a fair bit of Bruce Wayneism in the background here too. He funds the school basically single-handedly, gives the orientation speech, semi-frequently checks on Olive, and even comes to watch the school play. I like this. I like Bruce Wayne being actually present emotionally as Bruce after physically saving someone as Batman. It's a good use of the two identity structure. I'd love to see more miniseries like Gotham Academy First Year specifically, focused on normal or mostly normal Gothamites just trying to get by, like a gas station cashier or all the crazy stuff they'd have to deal with working the night shift. Just in general, stories that address the systemic issues in Gotham from both Bruce's perspective as a billionaire and the perspective of the little guy beyond the rich are using their dark money to keep us down and you won't be able to bribe me would be really compelling and interesting for me to see personally. And like I said, it's ultimately a setting thing too, where Gotham has so much potential, and exploring this makes Gotham feel so much more like a real place. Absolute Green Arrow just kicked off not that long ago, and there's some similar theming that is actually very much more intense in Green Arrow because there's like the billionaire murder quest happening. Absolute Green Arrow in general is actually serving exactly what I want so far, so I can't complain too much. It's got focused theming, intriguing mystery, the art is so cool, and this version of Black Canary is metal as hell. I just desire a Batman story that took things head on in the same way, especially because Bruce's position as somebody who inherited billions makes his relationship to this conflict a narrative goldmine that everyone seems to be afraid of. I also want Absolute Hawkwoman to happen so badly. Like, please, please. I know no one else wants that but me. I'm the only person who really wants this. But she is the character if you want to make somebody, like, rip and tear. She's the violent jacked bird woman with the medieval mace. Like, please. And I don't want her fraud boyfriend to be there either. No thank you. Her stupid fraud boyfriend who has gotten so much more than her in every iteration of the DC universe, please let me have this without him. I am specifically fond of Shayera Hall Thanagarian version. Everything has been about Kendra Saunders for like years at this point, and I am starved. I'm saying the Absolute Universe is the perfect opportunity for ripped alien Thanagarian bird woman with sci-fi super metal Shayera Hall. I like the wings being real and not a harness and like growing out of her shoulder blades. And I think it would be cool if she grew feathers on other parts of her body. and she could have like talons and she could like really like just rip people apart. It would be so cool. Please, I want absolute Hawkwoman so bad. It's not gonna happen. I'm never gonna get what I want, but I want it so bad. At least we finally have absolute Catwoman. I'm like every other comic fan. I just always want more. I'm just always asking for shit. TLDR, plenty of stories acknowledge a lot of the issues in Gotham, but they fail to engage with the fact that Bruce Wayne realistically could do a lot more than occasional donations about the whole thing. I want more stories to actually confront how much power Bruce has as a billionaire and how it affects the city and his relationship with his kids. A lot of the times all we see is Bruce attend parties and do random individual acts of kindness, when realistically infrastructure projects and subsidized grocery stores and other material improvements to living conditions in Gotham are the way to go. And we do see him do this occasionally, sometimes, but it's usually very much in passing and not with a lot of depth. I want to see more like the infrastructure villain from Robin 1993 issue number 18, where they just intentionally cause structures to fail to prove that proper upkeep isn't being done. I like this.